Hey guys, FirstinWeather here, back at it again with another video. Today I will be focusing on the El Nino versus the potential for a Modiki El Nino this winter, and I'll basically be discussing the likelihood of seeing a Modiki El Nino or an El Nino and the different effects that it could have on the continental United States. So if you recall, in my previous winter forecast I said I'm not really buying the hype of a Modiki El Nino, and this was a quote by me in my preliminary winter forecast, where I basically said, look, the potential for a Modiki El Nino just really isn't that great, and I think we're going to have a normal classic El Nino. But after looking more closely at the models and signs the Pacific is showing right now, I have decided that there certainly is potential for a Modiki El Nino to form, and I'll get more into that as we go later into the video. So, the El Nino that we know most, the classic El Nino. And in a classic El Nino, we have the warmest waters. If you look at my arrow, the warmest waters are hugging the coast of South America, the Nino 1+2 region. This is in a typical El Nino, you usually have the warmest waters concentrated right off the coast of South America, with them generally decreasing in intensity as you head further west. So as you can see here, the highest above average water temperatures are right here hugging the coast, and then as you expand westward, they generally and slowly decrease until you have temperatures that are right around average in the Central Pacific. However, in Modiki El Nino, look how different it is. You have the warmest waters centered in the Nino 3.4 region, and so this is basically the Central Pacific. So the warmest waters are not off South America. Instead, you actually have average to slightly above average waters off of South America, with the most above average waters being in the Central Pacific, with slightly cooler than average waters closer to Indonesia. So this is the difference. In the Modiki El Nino, you have the warmest waters to the west than in a typical classic El Nino. So these are the current sea surface temperatures basically in the equatorial Pacific, and as you can see, this big circle right here, it is an area of cooler than average sea surface temperatures, and this little black area that you see right here, that's South America. And typically when you want to see an El Nino form, you have warmer than average waters right here, but as you can see, you have way cooler than normal water temperatures right here, and that is not normal. Usually when you have an El Nino, these waters right here are warmer than average, so that definitely is not a good sign of a classic El Nino, and that basically further adds to the it's another hint, I should say, that we have potential for seeing a Modiki El Nino this winter. However, at the moment, there aren't really any other visible indicators that we're going to see a Modiki El Nino other than this one. And then maybe this cool spot right here indicating that the warmest waters will be right here. But again, this is the main area that's indicating that the potential for seeing a classic El Nino right now does not look that strong, because for a classic El Nino, all these waters have to be way above average. But it's very hard to see such a dramatic turnaround in the span of a few months from below average to way above average off the South American coast. So now let's look at what the weather models are thinking. This is the NMME model, and it has the warmest waters for meteorological winter, December, January, and February, in the Central Pacific, the 3.4 region. As you can see, the warmest waters are basically south of Alaska, right here, the center of it, while in a typical El Nino, the warmest waters would be south of Mexico. So the NMME model right here is showing the formation of a Modiki El Nino, which is quite interesting. Well, and it's just not one model either. This is a CFS model, and as you can see, exact same thing, except the area of warmer waters are expanded a little further north. And again, the warmest waters are south of Alaska, not south of Mexico, when they would be in a classic El Nino. And finally, the Jamstec model, which is another very commonly used forecasting model, long-range forecasting model, and this one is a little further to the east. This is not a definitive Modiki El Nino or a classic El Nino. This is basically in the middle, where the waters are not directly south of Mexico, but on the edge of it, or more like south of California, or like the southeastern tip of California. All right. But the consensus to take from this is that all three main long-range weather models are all saying that we will not have a classic El Nino out of now, and 2 out of 3 are saying we're going to have a Modiki El Nino. So that definitely is quite interesting, that all 3 main long-range weather models are saying that we have a higher likelihood of seeing a Modiki El Nino than a classic El Nino. So, impacts. Typically, when you have a classic El Nino, you have below average temperatures in the southeast, and then warmer than average temperatures in the northwest and upper Midwest. And then, in terms of precipitation, you have the famous dry area right here. This includes states like Ohio, Missouri, and Indiana. And then you have above average precip along the coast, along the western coast, and then basically in the southeast and northeast. And in an El Nino, like I said in my other video, you have the phasing of the 2 jet streams, and you get those big time storms off the east coast, and that's what produces the above average precipitation. And as you can see, the above average precip is basically in a perfect line that a typical winter snowstorm or nor'easter would take, where it goes up the coast like this and then just goes straight northeast, and you have that little line of above average precip extending down from Florida all the way to Maine. And one thing to note is, for this, I took all El Nino years, or almost all of them. So since 1900. So actually not 1900, more like 1940 and above, I think. And I took weak El Nino years, moderate El Nino years, strong El Nino years, and super strong El Nino years like the one we had a couple years ago. And I basically compiled all those together, and this is what it spit out. So again, to reiterate, below average temperatures in the southeast, above average in the upper Midwest and northwest, and then in precip below average here, above average along the eastern coast, and then above average along the western coast. And this is for a classic El Nino. However, when you go to a Modiki El Nino, it is completely different. The area of cold that you have in a classic El Nino basically shoots upward. You have cold essentially west of the Mississippi River, with cold everywhere west of the east of the Mississippi River. And then you also have cold or below average temperatures in the upper Midwest. This includes all of Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, all of Tornado Alley, and then the only place that you actually have the potential for above average temperatures is can't find the correct word. Northwestern Nevada, southeastern Oregon, and southern Idaho. And then in terms of precip, it's very similar to a classic El Nino. You have the wet western coast, the wet eastern coast, and then an area of drier than normal conditions in the eastern or central portion of the country. This includes states like Ohio, Indiana, Tennessee, and portions of the southeast. And the only real difference in terms of precip with the Modiki El Nino is that the below average precipitation is concentrated a little further south than the classic El Nino. And in terms of temperatures, the Modiki El Nino is much, much colder than the classic El Nino. So, here is my Modiki El Nino forecast. The likelihood, in my opinion, of seeing a Modiki El Nino is, I think, 80%. I think we have a pretty good bet of seeing a Modiki El Nino. The signs right now in the Pacific, in the current SSTs, or sea surface temperatures, we have cooler than normal waters off the coast of South America. Now, the models, the Jamstec, the CFS, the NMME, all of those are pointing to a Modiki El Nino. None of them are showing a classic El Nino. So I think we have a pretty good bet of seeing a Modiki El Nino this winter. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or concerns, please leave them below in the comment section, and I'll see you next time.